good afternoon, and welcome to our second session of the Sustainable Nutrition webinar cycle that is brought to you by Food for Sustainability Academy. So welcome. Today we will continue to look at the definition of sustainable nutrition. As we mentioned, for us it reflects the capability of the food system to provide energy and nutrients to the population's health, but of course without forgetting the future needs the needs of the future generations. That's what we are going to bring here today and continue this discussion, which actually follows from what we've been talking last week. If you remember, we're talking about turning waste into food, also as a goal to achieve the goal of sustainable nutrition. And today we're going to address the relationship between diet and a healthy life. And to understand these broader implications of the topic for the food system, we are joined today by three experts, which I start by truly thanking for your time and for your availability. It's really a pleasure to have you here with us. And we have with us Sowrya Kilaru. She's a dietitian and she works for GAIN, which is the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. And she will be guiding us to the world of fortified food. Thank you, Sowrya, for joining us. We also have Miriam Clegg. She's a nutritionist and an associate professor in human nutrition from Reading University. And Miriam will be focusing on protein consumption in older people. And we are also joined by Miriam Sanchez. She's a postdoctoral research at Instituto Murciano de Investigación Biosanitaria, the IMIB, and Maria, she's going to address the topic of mother to infant and the role of microbial transmission. So thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Today's session is going to be moderated by my colleague, Margarida Palma. You probably already know Margarida. She's our PhD in microbiology, and she'll be leading the session for you. So thank you all again for your presence. My name is Claudia Costa. I am the coordinator of Food for Sustainability Academy, which is our learning hub where we have educational activities, capacity raising, and awareness raising programs. We do going to start very interesting sessions on more related to farming and sustainable practices. I will ask the team to just post a link here in the chat for all those that wish to be present and to know more. And the role that we do here in the Academy, it's obviously to work towards the mission of Food for Sustainability Academy, which is to work towards the transition to more sustainable agri-food chain towards more health and well-being. And let me remind you that we cover the topics of circular economy, sustainable farming, questions around the territories, like, for example, autochthonous resources, and of course, functional nutrition. So, and if you want more information, please just go to our website. We have, several and very detailed information about what we do. Just before we start, let me also thank you to all those that make these webinars possible. First of all, all the Food for Sustainability team. It's always great to have your support, and especially acknowledge the great work of the byproduct valorizations team, and particularly Daniela Fonseca. Let me see if I can see Daniela. She's our PhD in green chemistry. Daniela is there in a very nice white background. Also Rita Silva, our microbiologist. Hello, Rita. And also Sylvia Moreira, our food science PhD. Hello, Sylvia. And they all make these webinars possible. So thank you so much for your effort. And while we proceed, let me also remind you some of the house rules. As you know, these webinars are recorded. So if you do not wish to appear, please just keep your cameras off. You're not forced to keep your cameras off. We like to see faces, so you're very welcome to join us with your face. But just to let you know that this is going to be recorded. And as always, these sessions, are more interesting and they are enriched with your participation. So questions are welcome. We also learn a lot from your questions. So we invite you to take part in Slido. The questions will be open, and at the end of each presentation, we will address, as many questions as we can to each of the speakers. So please, I encourage to take part. If you think that Slido is a bit difficult for you to participate, okay, if you feel more comfortable with using the chat here in Teams, please do so, and we will paste your question to Slido. So I hope that doesn't prevent you for taking part. So these are the house rules. So what we have now, and we always started with a short quiz to try your knowledge on the topics that we are going to discuss here today. So let me invite you to join Slido. So you can join Slido by, and Sylvia very kindly has already put up the slide here. So if you write into your tab www.slido.com, and in the hashtag box you insert F4S Academy, you should be able to join Slido, and you will see the short quiz that the team has prepared for you. So I'll just give you a couple of seconds for you to join Slido. Sylvia, I don't know if it's just me, but I cannot see the questions. Probably is something from my end. I don't know if you all can see the questions. Our speakers can also join Slido if you want. Let's also test your knowledge. And so the first question is, what is the percentage of people over 65 that are malnutritious, nourished, or at risk of malnutrition? And this is a statistic for the UK. And let's wait for more people to vote. So as we all know, ensuring a healthy diet in adults is a very important strategy to support health, well-being, independence, and quality of life, to go towards what some call the aging 3.0. And this is something that Miriam actually works, and she also works in several strategies for improvements in diets, particularly for older people, and to make sure that older people consume a nutrient-dense diet, because as we can see from the percentage, there are quite a lot of people that are either malnourished or at least in risk of becoming malnutrition. So, Miriam, do we have this percentage right? Slightly.
Slightly. So that's 1 in 10, but that data is actually from, sorry, let me just double check my slide.
Okay, don't worry.
Yeah, it's a few years old. So there's newer data which suggests that might actually be higher than that.
It might be. So our audience, as always, they are very knowledgeable, but what we have so far published is that 1 in 10 people are actually at risk or even malnourished, and we are talking about developed countries. So this is something that's we should be attentive to. Definitely an important topic. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you for taking part. And we go to the second question. This is more difficult question, maybe, let's see. And this relates to secondary bile acids. What are they, in fact? Are they the acids produced by bacteria in our guts? Are they the acids produced by our liver, or by our stomach, or by our intestine? What do you think? And, the answers are moving. They are moving fast. Let's see if we have a draw. No, we don't have a draw. So the bile acids, they actually play a key role in gut metabolism, also in cell signaling and microbe composition. This is actually the work that Maria has been developing for the last couple of years. And while the liver is responsible for the production of the primary bile acids, the microbes in the gut, they are the ones that modify these compounds into several other compounds and achieve the biological functions and their biological diversity. So in fact, you know, the secondary bile acids are the acids that are produced by bacteria in our guts, right? And
Yeah.
Maria is nodding.
Exactly.
And Maria will tell us more about their role and their relationship towards some diseases like problems with the at the infancy. So thank you so much. And now we have a final question that relates to the work that Sowrya has been doing. And this is again a striking number, but are you aware of how many people are affected by micronutrient deficiency around the world? So we are talking here about big numbers, 1 million, 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion. So just starts to show that quite a lot of the food system actually fails to get essential vitamins and minerals to quite a lot of people. And some of the work of GAIN, and Sowrya will elucidate us a little bit more on this. We'll look at strategies like industrial fortification and bio fortification that are, you know, strategies that are known to lead to better health outcomes and can actually have an impact in terms of birth defects and blindness and anemia. And so it's important to keep an eye, you know, how these micronutrient deficiencies affect the world, the population. And you're absolutely right. 2 billion people are thought to be affected by micronutrient deficiency. This is a huge number, and we'll hear more about the work from GAIN to try to go around this huge problem. So thank you so much for taking part in this short quiz. I hope you enjoy it. I will now pass the floor to Margarida to present our speakers and to start to kick off this very interesting discussion. So Margarida, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Claudia. So first of all, it is a great pleasure to have you all with us today. Thanks again for accepting our invitation. So as Claudia said, I'll start by briefly introducing our three speakers. So first we will have Sowrya Kilaru, which is a registered dietitian with 15 years experience in the field of health and nutrition. She leads the large-scale food fortification program at GAIN. GAIN stands for Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, where she tries to find innovative solutions with effective public-private partnerships to help eradicate malnutrition. Sowrya's presentation is entitled Fortifying Your Food, an Essential Tool in the Fight Against Malnutrition. Next, we will have Miriam Clegg. Miriam is a UK registered nutritionist, associate professor of human nutrition and deputy director of the Institute of Food Nutrition and Health at the University of Reading. Her research focuses on appetite and nutritional intake across the lifespan. She has over 10 years experience in leading, coordinating and collaborating on multidisciplinary and commercial research and dissemination projects. And she is the PI on the Food for Years Aging Network program and a work package lead on other funded projects like the Fortify and the Raising the Pulse. So Miriam's presentation is entitled Dietary Strategies for Improving Healthy Life Expectancy, a Focus on Protein. The last but not the least, so we will have Maria Sanchez. Maria is a researcher at Instituto Murciano de Investigación Biosanitária. Maria graduated in biochemistry at the University of Murcia. She did her PhD, and after the PhD, she joined the bile acid group at University College Cork in Ireland, where she got a Marie Curie Fellow. Here, she studied the role of secondary bile acids on gut development in early infancy and its implications for health statuses later in life. She returned to Spain to work as a principal investigator and study the relation between the metabolome, epigenome, and microbiome in the mother-infant axis and childhood obesity and metabolic diseases predisposition. Maria's presentation is entitled Mother to Infant Microbial Transmission and its Implications in Health and Disease in the Offspring, the Case of Secondary Bile Acids. So thank you. I will now give the floor to Sowrya. Please share your slides with us, Sowrya.
Thank you, Margarida, for the introduction. I will share my screen. Just let me know once you see my slides.
Yes.
Let's put that on. Yeah. Maybe I minimize that. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. As my topic for today is fortification, and what I would like to take you all through is an essential tool in the fight against malnutrition. So how does fortification help in the fight against malnutrition? What we'll quickly have a look at is Introduction to GAIN. If you haven't heard about the NGO, Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, what is the current number of hunger, malnutrition, and micronutrient deficiencies, not only in developing countries, but also in high-income developed countries, the solutions that we have, the work that we are addressing to eradicate malnutrition, and some example of the projects that we're working on in our countries. So what is GAIN? GAIN is an international NGO with a headquarters in Geneva in Switzerland. It's a 20-year-old NGO founded by United Nations, and it delivers programs in 11 countries. And you can see the red highlighted countries there where we have our essential programs. We have 300 staff, 65 million annual budget, funded by over 40 donor partners. We're supported by 10 national food system pathways, and you will hear more about it in the following presentation. All right, these numbers look bad, and I'm sorry to start with a very negative connotation to this presentation, but I promise you there is some light at the end of the tunnel. So this is a 2022 Lancet report. So you can find this. There are links in this presentation, and you can read more about it online. But there are 28 million people worldwide that are going to bed hungry every day, 2.2 billion overweight and obese. 3 to 4 billion do not consume enough micronutrients. 1 in 5 deaths in countries are linked to poor diets. So these are really gross numbers. It's a little sad to see that even children and women of reproductive age, around 1.6 billion, are deficient in one or more vitamin and mineral. As you see, this is split here between the low-income and high-income countries. So 9 in 10 women in Africa and Asia have one micronutrient deficiency, but you would also see that here below in UK and US, the numbers are equally high. I could give you an example of myself. I was born and brought up in India, where due to my vegetarian diet, I was deficient in iron and B12. And when I moved to Europe, where I am right now, I had an additional deficiency of vitamin D. So it is not that these deficiencies are far away. They are right between us, within us. We also have a double burden of malnutrition. So it's not only deficiency like anemia, wasting, or hunger, but it's also overweight, obesity, blood pressure, diabetes, and cardiovascular health issues. And on this chart, which is taken from the Global Nutrition Report from 2021, shows a split of these issues between men and women, and they're almost 50-50. So why are there micronutrient deficiencies in high-income countries, you may ask? And I think the picture is very self-explanatory. It's the increased consumption of ultra-processed foods. Ultra-processed foods, as you know, are high in calories, sugar, salt, but very low in nutrients, especially micronutrients that our body needs. Unless they are fortified, they do not have enough. This is a nice map that actually shows the increased amount of consumption of ultra-processed foods per capita. And if you see the countries that are mapped in darker blue are the higher number of consumption of these ultra-processed foods. And these are all high-income countries. And why are there deficiencies in low-income countries? I think this we all know. So one is diet diversity. What they consume in these countries are mostly starch-rich, so carbohydrate-rich products or food, and less of vegetables or fruits. And one could be availability, or the other is affordability. Even eating just one fruit a day is uncommon in many of these countries. And if you look at this chart, which is a 2022 chart from the Global Diet Quality Project, you will see where these numbers are higher, where you don't have enough of fruit and vegetable consumption. This chart is a little bit scary, but it is the truth of where we are right now. So chronic hunger numbers were getting lower. So if you look at 2005, we were around 805 million, and that was reducing over the years. And if you look at 2015, we reached to a number of average of 589 million. From 805, that is a good drop. But over the last years, especially since 2019, those numbers are increasing again. And if you look at 2021, the number of hunger is 768 million. And this is due to various reasons that we're already aware of, which is COVID or Ukraine crisis or the climate shocks. So this is something that we need to keep our eyes and ears wide open and try to see where these issues are and how do we tackle it to reduce this. So what does GAIN do? So we seek to make nutritious and safe foods available, affordable, and aspirational. There are three areas that we work heavily on, which is demand creation. So basically increasing the knowledge of consumers on the choices, the nutritious food choices that they need to make, especially in the developing countries where they are unaware of it. They are unaware of the issues that they have related to deficiency, like anemia, low birth weight, stunting. So we need to increase their knowledge based on that, but also increase the supply. So if they go to their little shops to buy groceries, there should be available, affordable, nutritious food, which is also fortified to have enough nutrients, but also support the businesses so that they can produce enough of these nutritious foods. An enabling environment is work with the government so that they create the right policies or the right taxation so that they have incentives on these kind of nutritious foods in the supply chain. So these are the various areas that we in GAIN work around. You can have more information if you look at the website. Today, I will be going through two of them, which is large-scale food fortification and biofortification. So what is LSFF or large-scale food fortification? It basically is the addition of vitamin and minerals to staple foods, which is consumed on a larger scale. And that's basically wheat, maize, milk, oil, salt, and sugar. And these are the nutrients that you see below that we add, which is iron, B vitamins, vitamin A, D, iodine. So these are the nutrients that strengthen the immune system and help to prevent sickness, apart from of the many other disorders that it helps prevent. And therefore, fortifying is the best solution forward, also in terms of investment. There was a study done in the 1990s by the Copenhagen Status Report, which is something you can, again, Google and find out, where they've done this data, whereas $1 invested in fortification generates a $27 return on improved health and productivity. So that is a huge number of, I would say, return of investment, and it is a no-brainer to just go ahead with fortifying food to help eradicate malnutrition. In terms of global mandate, so it really helps if there is a regulation or policy in the government that mandates fortification. And currently around 91 countries have it mandated by law that they need to fortify their wheat, their maize, and their rice. And you see the countries which are higher in green, so the darker green shade of color of countries are the countries that have at least these three of the staples to be fortified. So if you go to your supermarket tomorrow, just look for these nutrients in your staple food. Are they fortified? These are a few examples of the successes that we've had in a few countries. This is a snapshot from Kenya, where you see a woman who's cleaning the maize. So this is maize flour. What we worked in Kenya with is we worked with the government to ensure that 3 of these staple foods, which is flour, maize, wheat flour, and edible oil, is fortified with the right amount of nutrients. We've been working with the government of Kenya since 2010, and we're happy to say that now, after a few years, 20 large-scale millers are providing fortified food to 350,000 children. And we worked with over 60 food businesses to ensure that they are aware of it and they start increasing the production of fortified food and also make it accessible to the poorest of poor. The other example is from Mozambique, and this was one of the salt producers from Machanga, Manuel Augusto. And he has said this earlier, it was very difficult to find iodine to iodize the salt. And what GAIN, along with the Ministry of Industry and Commerce in Mozambique, have tried to make it available by donating iodine, which is potassium iodate, in the right amount, and also train them and give them the right capacity so that they can iodize their salt. And therefore now they're able to iodize the salt and also make it available freely in the market. That was mainly on industrial fortification, which I mentioned, which we call large-scale fortification, where you add nutrients at the processing level to the staples. What I'm going to touch upon here is biofortification, which is basically you take your foods, and maybe this slide explains it better. So these are micronutrient crops which are developed through conventional breeding. They're not genetically modified, so don't get confused by that, but they are very organically bred to increase the density of certain nutrients in these crops. For example, beans already have a good amount of iron, but we take the variety of bean that has the highest amount of iron and we crossbreed that with the other saplings of bean so that you have a high iron bean or a millet, you have high zinc rice or wheat, and high vitamin A cassava or maize, which are the staple foods consumed by most African countries. This is a nice example of a homegrown school feeding program, which is very close to my heart. This is a picture from Tanzania, where they have school feeding programs supplied by the government. And what we as GAIN do is supply them biofortified maize flour and also high iron beans. So on the left, the picture that you see is saplings of the beans that they are growing behind the school. So the school itself has a little farm behind their compound, and they grow their own vegetables and their grains. So we provide them with the high iron beans, and then they grow that to provide it to the meals to the students. And we provide them with biofortified maize flour. So that's a typical meal of an East African school-going child, which is ugali, which is the yellow part, which is made of maize flour. And you have the beans, which is high iron beans, and either a banana or some cabbage. This comes to close to the end of my presentation. So there are huge economic benefits apart from the health benefits of improving nutrition in an economy of the country. Adults who were well nourished as children earn at least 20% more than those who weren't. Eliminating child undernutrition could increase the GNP by 11% in Africa and Asia, which is a big number. And over the next 20 years, NCDs or non-communicable diseases will cost over $30 trillion in terms of GDP, which is also a big number. So we have to put in more effort in terms of improving nutrition. So I would like to leave you with a few key messages. Malnutrition is widespread globally. Billions are affected by it. It's a combination of challenges are increasing these deficiencies, which is climate, conflict, COVID, you name it. Deficiencies are higher in low and high income countries. So let's not think that it is something that the other side of the world is dealing with. We all are dealing with it. In higher income countries, diets are dominated by ultra processed foods, which are low in nutrients. And in lower income, there is low in diversity and affordability of these nutritions. So we all need to take action across supply, demand, policy, business, finance, and innovation to turn the tide on this issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sowrya, for your excellent presentation and for giving us this overview about this global scenario on malnutrition and micronutrient deficiencies and GAIN's fortification programs. So those numbers you first showed us smashed us. It's amazing that globally we have so many different situations. We have billions of people that suffer from overweight or obesity and billions that suffer from malnutrition. So my first question is, what is the difference between hunger, malnutrition, and micronutrient deficiencies?
So if you look at malnutrition, malnutrition can be under or over. So when you say under, it could be a wide range. It could be anemia. It could be a low vitamin B12, low vitamin BT. So it could be all of the different deficiencies, but also over, which is, as I mentioned, obesity, cardiovascular disorders, high blood pressure. So that's malnutrition in general. But when you look at hidden hunger, or I would say hidden hunger, is these deficiencies, but they're not visible clearly. So if your child is tired, he could be tired for various reasons. But when you do a blood test, you will see that there's iron deficiency, therefore anemia, and therefore he's tired. So that is how we link it to hunger, which we call hidden hunger.
Okay. So we already have a lot of questions here in our Slido, but just before going to those questions, so I would like to ask you if it's easier to implement these programs in developing countries or in developed countries, because how people receive those biofortified food, that biofortified food is different in different countries. So are these campaigns easier to implement in developing or in developed countries?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in developing countries, there is a need for demand creation. So to increase the knowledge of these, the benefits of biofortified. So that is one which is low. The education level is low, the knowledge level is low, awareness is low. Whereas in developed countries, that level is there. So they know what the deficiencies are, and they know that they need to eat right. In developing countries, also the cost. Biofortification will come at a slightly higher cost compared to the normal food, which again is a big thing in terms of priority for a poorest of poor neighborhood, whereas in developed countries, the cost is not an issue. So implementing them is easier in a developed country compared to a developing nation.
Okay. So let's look at the questions from our participants. So the first one is how to increase knowledge if Nutri-Score has highly processed cereals with a Hay score. What do we need to do as consumers?
I laugh because it's very close to my heart. I worked on this in my previous organization. So yeah, Nutri-Score is tricky. I would ask everyone to go back. Everybody's learned nutrition in some part of your school-going days. Yeah, so go back to the basics. Turn the product. Look at the label. Don't look at the score. Look at the nutrition table on the back of pack. So what is carbohydrate, protein, fiber? Is there any salt? What is the amount of salt? Is there any nutrients? Are there vitamins? Are there ions or mineral in it? That's where you need to calculate, because Nutri-Score, also if you go to their website, it's very easily explained there, is only calculating it based on macronutrients and not micronutrients. So that's very important for us to understand. And they do not take processing into account. It could be an ultra processed food with vitamin, with an A score, and processing also needs to be checked, because why are we consuming such empty calories? They need to have good amount of fiber, good amount of vegetables and nutrients. I can go on and on this topic, but I will stop here.
Okay. So the next question is, what is stopping so many countries to sell these fortified foods?
Yeah, it is a whole number of issues of why these countries are not. There are, as I showed in the map, there are countries that are now mandating it. So the first and the most important step to increase the sales of fortified food is mandate by the government. If the government puts it in law, then people are going to do it. Otherwise, the incentive for fortifying is very less, because you're selling the fortified maize flour at a higher price compared to a normal maize flour. Producer is not going to sell it because consumers are not going to buy it. But if the government mandates it and there are regular checks about it, then at least we know that the producers are producing it and consumers are buying it.
So this kind of answers the next question. Are the biofortified foods more expensive due to the fact that the process of production is more complicated?
It is, but if you compare to the price, and I can tell you in Tanzanian shillings, the maize flour, a 1 kg pack of maize flour would be around 10,000 shillings, but biofortified maize flour would be around 12,000. So if you compare the price, the increase is very minimum, but still it is higher.
Okay. Is there a risk of over micronutrients? Should fortified food be advised by a specialist according to the individual characteristics or condition of someone?
Yes.
Yes.
And that is the reason why we want the government to be involved. Not that any producer in the market would start adding nutrients and he would not account to the amount that's been added. So over hypervitaminosis is also an issue that can happen when you're consuming too many nutrients. And that shouldn't be the case. So when the government is involved, they will legally check what are the amount of nutrients that are being added.
Yeah. So I have a final question just before we move to the next presentation. So based on the examples you have shown, I see that biofortification happens at the level of the crop and not at the level of food supplementation with vitamins or minerals. So how do you foresee the biofortification programs in a future challenged by climate change?
Yeah, biofortification is still new. Large-scale industrial fortification has been started in 1950s and biofortification in the last couple of years. So we still have to check in terms of crop viability to the changing climate conditions, but also the yield in terms of, versus organic product versus a normal product. There is a difference in the yield. So all these factors are also being considered for biofortification. But there's a lot of research undergoing also to increase and to ensure that they are stable for all these factors. So it should be, you should see more of it in the coming years.
Okay. Sowrya, thank you so much for your presentation and for your answers to our Q&A moment. So we are now moving to our next speaker. Miriam, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to speak today. It's much appreciated. So I'm going to talk today about dietary strategies for improving healthy life expectancy with a focus on protein intake. My name is Miriam Clegg, and I'm an associate professor in human nutrition at the University of Reading. I'm also a principal investigator on the Food for Years Aging Network, which is a network funded by the UKRI to bring together people, researchers, food industry, clinicians, to help develop a food environment that supports us as we age. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a few minutes. So the population of people aged over 65 is growing, and this isn't something that we're just seeing in the UK, it's something that's happening globally. So here you can see the population in the UK in 2019, and you can see that as we get to 65 plus, the population starts to decrease. However, projections into 2039 shows that this life expectancy is increasing, and people age 60, the number of people aged 65 and over is increasing. And it's projected that by 2050, 1 in 4 people in the UK will be aged 65 years and over, an increase of approximately 1 in 5 from 1 in 5 in 2019. So what's the actual problem with this? So UK life expectancy has increased by 3 decades since the early 20th century. However, there's little evidence that suggests that these gains in life expectancy are translated into increased years living in good health for older adults when compared to previous generations. So the incidence rates for chronic diseases, many of which are diet related, such as osteoporosis or type 2 diabetes, are increasing. And this is because treatments allow us to live for longer, but to live with these conditions for a longer period of time. And this has consequences for health and social care costs, but also for impact on quality of life during these years. So what we want to see happen is we want to see this life expectancy to stay as long as it is now or to increase further, but we want to see our health span, or the time that we spent living in good health, to also increase alongside this. Sorry, my slide's not moving forward. There we go. Okay, so as your statistics showed at the start, 1 in 10 people in the UK are suffering from or at risk from malnutrition. And new analysis from Age UK in 2021 revealed that 1 in 4 million older adults aged 60 plus in England have said that they've been eating less since the start of the pandemic. And therefore, this could be at greater risk of becoming malnourished. And 3.7 million of these say that either they or others in their household have been unable to eat a healthy or nutritious food. So this, demonstrates to us that actually this 1 in 10 statistic might be even greater following the pandemic. And also we know with the increasing food prices as well, that this might be an issue. A nutritious diet is really essential for healthy aging in older adults and reducing the risk of chronic diseases and functional decline. And evidence indicates that increases in individual macronutrients, especially protein, has beneficial health outcomes for things like the risk of frailty, fracture risk, cognition. And all of these can have further consequences, such as people's independence and their quality of life. So quite often what I get asked is, what about obesity? How can we have such an issue with malnutrition when we have such high obesity rates? The Health Survey for England estimates that 25.9% of adults in England are obese and a further 37.9% are overweight. So how can we have such high obesity rates while we still have malnutrition? Well, researchers in France looked at this, at the prevalence of undernutrition and risk of undernutrition in overweight and obese older people. And what they found was that 2% of the respondents from their data set with a BMI of over 25 were undernourished, and 23% were at risk of undernutrition. And overall, 18% of overweight and 29% of obese respondents were at risk of undernutrition. So why is this the case? So if you look here, these are the UK dietary requirements, and you can see them across the age groups. So you can see from ages 19 to 24, all the way up to 65 to 74 and 75 plus. And you can see the energy requirements for males and for females. And what you'll see is that as we get older, our energy requirements start to decrease. And this is because we're less active, we're not doing quite as much, muscle mass decreases. So our energy requirements decline slightly over this time period. So these are the reference nutrient intakes then for vitamins across the lifespan. So again, you can see for males here, for females here, and you can see for the different age groups. So this is from 11 to 14 up to 50 years plus. And so you can see the two adult groups, 19 to 50 years and 50 years plus, and here for females, 19 to 50 and 50 years plus. And this is for a range of different vitamins. So what you see across the lifespan is that the differences in vitamins requirements as we age doesn't really decline. So you can see for thiamine, there's ever so slight decrease, and this is due to our decrease in energy requirements. But for most other micronutrients, there's very little, there's no difference really. And you see something similar here for minerals. So you can see for 19 to 50 years, you can see they're almost exactly the same. There's a decline here in females once they reach the menopause. So you can see a decrease in iron requirements. But essentially, our micronutrient requirements maintain the same. So what this means is we have this decrease in energy requirements as we age, but our micronutrient requirements stay almost exactly the same. So this means that essentially we need to try pack as much micronutrients into much less food. So our diet needs to be actually much more nutrient dense as we age. And this isn't really a message that necessarily always gets out. So as I mentioned, my title of my talk talks about protein intakes, and I have a strong interest in protein intake in older adults. So in the UK, the recommendations for protein are 0.75 grams per kilogram body weight per day. And there has been suggestions from other research groups that this recommendation should actually be higher. And this is because we've increased risk of sarcopenia, decreased muscle perfusion, anabolic resistance, and low postprandial amino acid availability as we age. And so ESPN and the ProTage study group suggests that actually as we get older, our protein requirements should be increased from 0.75 grams per kilogram body weight per day to 1 to 1.2 grams, and for those who have acute or chronic illness, from 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilogram body weight per day. So again, as I mentioned, if our energy requirements are decreasing, we actually need to fit this increased protein requirement into less food again. This is data taken from a study by Morris et al. Looking at a group of 256 older adults aged between 65 and 89 years of age. And they looked at the percentage of this population that were meeting these nutrient requirements. So if you look at the table up here under A, you can see the percentage that are consuming less than 0.75 grams per kilogram body weight per day of protein. And you can see that 35% weren't meeting the UK requirements at present. And you can see for the higher requirements outlined by Espen, 85% of them aren't meeting this. And there's also a recommendation that protein should be fed throughout the day, so it shouldn't just all happen in one go, and that in order to have the greatest benefits to muscle protein synthesis, that it should be consumed a 25-gram bolus 3 times a day. So here they looked at the number of people that were consuming these 25-gram doses or boluses of protein at 0, 1, 2, or 3 intervals throughout the day. So you can see that 18% of them were having it 0 times per day, and 56% of people were having 25 grams in one go at one time during the day, but only 0.4% were doing that at 3 times throughout the day. Then if you look over at B, the table in B here, what you see is when people were consuming this 25 grams during the day. So you can see that between 5 a.m. and 11 a.m., about 25% of people were able to achieve it in this time span. Then between 11 and 5 p.m., the majority of people were able to achieve it. And then less people again were able to achieve it in the evening. And this tells us that essentially people are achieving it during their main meal of the day. They're able to achieve this 25 grams, but in other meals, they aren't able to achieve that. And that kind of makes sense. In the UK, you tend to have a high protein portion to your main meal, your dinner type meal of the day, whereas things like breakfast could tend to be quite low in protein. Another interesting thing that they found was that the correlation between protein intake and body mass index was actually inversely related. So those with a higher body mass index were actually consuming less protein, which links back to this idea about malnutrition still being an issue in obesity. So what are the challenges that we're facing in this area? Well, firstly, we really need to explore around building consumer awareness about the importance of eating specifically for healthy aging. So we know that we have these increased nutrient requirements, or nutrient density perhaps requirements, but it doesn't necessarily mean that older adults are really getting this message. And we also know that older adults don't necessarily want to consume foods specifically for them. So this is from a paper by Whitelock and Ensaf, where they did focus groups in older adults, and they said a little bit of what you fancy does you good. So I try to keep it that way. Another person said, well, I eat things I shouldn't really eat, but if I want it, I have it. Another person said, I think you come to that stage where you think, right, that's it, enjoy yourself. And I think we can all relate to that. You know, food needs to be enjoyable. You know, there's no point in eating things that we don't like. So I bring you to this quote that says, food has no nutritional value until it's chosen, accepted, and consumed. So unless people are actually willing to eat the food, there's no point in us putting it out there. In the UK, the current market offer of real food solutions, so I'm talking about actual foods for older adults, is really modest. If you walk into a supermarket, you'll see hundreds of products available for children, for infants, but really there's nothing available for older adults. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Older adults don't necessarily want to buy foods for old people, but I think there's some work that can be done around, you know, making foods for healthy aging and helping us to age more healthily. So we've been looking at fortification, actually, which links on quite nicely from our previous presentation. And we've been looking at the types of foods that older adults actually do enjoy eating. So Rachel Smith, one of our postdocs, did this fabulous piece of work looking at data from the National Diet and Nutrition Survey in the UK. And we looked at the difference in the types of foods that older adults are consuming compared to younger people. So you can see the older adults are in the top 2 lines of each of these sets of foods, with younger people aged 19 to 64 in the darker line at the bottom. So what you can see from this is that older adults tended to consume less meat products from it. They tended to eat more milk and milk products. And from this data, we were able to break it down even further and look into some of these food groups a bit more. And so we found some interesting differences in the cereals and cereal products. And this is the percentage contribution of protein to their diet. So you can see that in younger people, a large proportion of their protein is coming from pasta, rice, and pizza, whereas this isn't the case in older people. And what we did find is that older people are consuming quite a lot of higher fibre breakfast cereals and are more likely to eat brown, granary, and wheat germ breads. And we also found that older people were more likely to consume semi-skimmed milk and get more of their protein from semi-skimmed milk as well. So this is just a snapshot of this data set, and if you look at the paper, you'll be able to see more on this. One other thing we did in this data set as well is we looked at data from the Food Standards Agency, Food and Use Survey, and we looked at where older adults are purchasing their foods from as well. And what we could see here is that the majority of older adults were purchasing their foods in large supermarkets rather than in smaller independent shops. So what this really tells us is that if we want to have food products available for older adults that meet older adults' food needs, they need to be available in the supermarkets so that they can get them more easily. So this links on quite nicely to a project that we're undertaking at the moment called Fortify. Fortify is funded by the BBSRC and a healthy diet for a healthy life. And it's being led by INRA in France in collaboration with NAFIMA in Norway, CHU and VUB as well. It's called Preventing the Risk of Undernutrition by Fostering Meal Fortification and Physical Activity in Older Adults. And the aim of it is to develop and assess protein fortified dishes for older adults, considering their suitability and the liking for older adults, their bioavailability, satiety and appetite, as well as their potential to be implemented within dietary and physical activity interventions. So this, I'm just going to give you a quick outline of the project. We don't have a whole lot of data from it because it just started last April, so we're just bringing together the data at this stage. So the start of the project was about developing fortified recipes. So we worked with older adults to develop these recipes based on the data set that I've just shown you, but also undertaking focus groups with older adults as well and with their caregivers. And also doing questionnaires with them about the types of equipment that they have in their home, the types of foods that they like to consume, how they go about consuming things. So things like batch cooking came up quite a lot, and we've been able to implement that within our strategies. From this, we developed the recipes, and in the University of Reading at the moment, we're looking at the bioavailability and satiety responses to these fortified dishes. So when we consume a high protein food, we know that protein can be quite satiating, and in studies in younger people have showed that protein is the most satiating macronutrient. So when we have these recommendations to increase protein intake in older adults, one thing we're very conscious of is that we don't want to give recommendations to eat more of something that's going to cause them to eat nothing else for the rest of the day. Because they've eaten too much protein and they feel too full. So one of the things we're looking at in this study is the satiety responses to these fortified dishes to compare if they feel more full after consuming them. And we're also looking at the bioavailability of protein within them. These recipes are then being taken into an intervention study, which will combine the fortified recipes with physical activity in older adults, and we've just started recruitment for this. And then we're doing recommendations and dissemination, and we'll be starting a MOOC, a massive open online course, which will be open early next year. So just to give you some preliminary data from older adults, from some of the focus groups that we did. These are some of the responses that we've had to it. So at first, they didn't really see that it was a problem. I can see that we have quite a lot of protein in our diet, so I really don't think I need it. And this came out quite strongly as well in the data, that a lot of older adults didn't feel they're quite old enough for it yet. So we're looking at care homes or looking at social services possibly. So they never thought that it was really something that they needed. It was always for somebody a bit older than them. I think that the age group you're aiming for are quite set in their ways. So they said, you know, people aren't really going to be willing to change their behaviours. People are quite set in their ways and they're not going to change it. Another key theme that came out in the focus groups was the lack of knowledge about what protein was and where it came from. So is there much protein in a banana? Somebody else said, oh, we put strawberries on it so that they have protein in them. So there was, we were quite surprised by how little knowledge they had about things that contain protein actually in them. And then we showed them different recipes, and they were also quite surprised by how much food they should have been consuming. So my porridge is half that quantity. And similarly, we showed them a cheese sandwich and they said, oh, I'd only have half the cheese sandwich. I wouldn't eat the whole thing. And we'd mapped this out to put the 25 grams of protein in each meal. So it was interesting to see how they really wouldn't be able to achieve this just using regular foods as well. And then when we looked at the protein fortification, we did it using food-based strategies, but we also looked at protein fortification with powders and what they thought about this. And I think at first they were all, a bit unsure about adding protein powders to food. It's not something any of us would have thought of, something we want to do. But I think if you get the education right, you realise the importance of it. Sorry, has my screen stopped sharing? Okay. And also a final theme that came out quite strongly was their interest in planetary health. And this wasn't something that we really had thought would come out that strongly from older adults. But actually they were quite concerned about the planet, and several of them commented on following plant-based diets. Many of them were vegetarians, much more than we had thought would have been the case. So I'm just going to finish it off there, and hopefully it's given you a little snapshot of some of the work that we're doing. We do have several other projects on this, and I could talk on about it for a lot longer. But if you do want to get in touch with us and find out more about our Aging Network, then please look at the webpage or follow us on Twitter. If you look at the webpage, it will give you the link also to register for the network as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Miriam. That was an excellent presentation. We tend to forget the problems of people over 65 until we have to deal with it, either because our grandparents or our parents reach that age, or because we reach that age. So usually it's not a hot topic, but it's very important, and especially because we have an increase in life expectancy. Thank you for bringing us this projects you have on this topic. So my first question is maybe more technical. While you were presenting, I was thinking, how do you measure malnutrition? Because if we see that someone is overweight, we don't think that person can have nutrient deficiencies. And this also relates to the previous presentation. So how is the nutritional assessment done? Do you run blood tests or inquiries to the people at this age?
Yeah, there's different ways of doing it. A lot of the simplest ways are done using questionnaires, and they'll be to do with weight loss is one of the key markers of it. Body mass index will be counted as one of the markers in it. So if someone has a low BMI, obviously they're going to be more at risk of malnutrition. Weight loss in older adults is a bit of an issue because they always spend a whole lot of middle age trying to lose weight, and then suddenly they get older and they start to lose weight and they think this is a good thing, so they don't necessarily recognize that actually this is actually something that should be followed up and is an issue. Many of them are actually quite happy that they've finally managed to lose some weight, and there's some work to do around the messaging around this, because it's not something that they flag as being an issue. Yeah.
Okay. You just mentioned that older people tend to eat less protein, and from your work we see that there's a higher contribution to daily protein intake that comes from meat products, but this contribution from meat products decreases over the years, contrary to milk products. So we see that older people tend to eat more milk products and to get their protein from milk products instead of meat products. Is this related to the texture of food at this age? Or, I mean, chewing meat is harder than chewing and swallowing milk products. I don't know if it's related or not. Can you?
Yeah, it could be. It could be because it's easier to consume, and obviously older adults do have problems with some types of meat that they might find it more difficult to consume. We have found across a couple of studies that we've done that the dairy intake is quite higher in older adults. I don't know whether that's a preference thing or if it's you know, this may be what they've grown up consuming high amount of dairy products. Yeah, and even within the meat category, we found younger people consumed a very high amount of chicken compared to older people, whereas the red meat wasn't all that much different. So I think the difference in the meat relates to chicken consumption actually in the younger age groups.
Okay. So we have already questions here in our screen. So the first one is, older people need a personalized diet. Why are not the country's governments working on that? Why are populations not aware of that need in general?
Yeah, I think there's this discrepancy that I talked about, is that they don't necessarily, the dietary recommendations aren't really that different for them. It's this difference in the recommendations per energy content that's different. So I don't think that message is necessarily getting out there as well as it should. But I guess because the recommendations aren't actually that different. And in the UK, the scientific, the SACN have just done a position statement on older adult nutrition, and they haven't actually recommended any changes to dietary guidelines for older people. They just think there isn't enough evidence out there to support that at this stage. So I think unless there's clear different dietary guidelines for older people, then that's not going to come across. Yeah, I think there is work to do. I think at a policy level, definitely. Yeah.
Yes. I can picture my grandma saying all those quotes about on protein and quantity of food. What can we do to help them consuming the right food amount of food? The right food or the right amount of food?
Yeah, I think there's lots of different things. Some of it's around food, but some of it's also some of the things that we've talked about already about loneliness and you know, the reasons that people aren't consuming enough food. So some of it might be to do with decreases in appetite, and things like staying physically active might help with that. But some of it's also about you know, if people are lonely, if they've lost a partner or something like that. Sorry, I'm about to sneeze.
That's okay.
So if something like that happens, then, you know, they don't want to prepare food for themselves. They don't have as much of an inclination to eat. In terms of actual foods, you know, putting things into foods that makes them more protein rich. So some of the examples that we've been using are things like putting ground almonds into sauces, using high protein yogurts. So what we do see quite often in the UK is that there's a lot of high protein products out there. They're just not marketed towards older people. They're marketed towards athletes. Whereas actually these products could be quite useful for older people. Yeah.
Where do you get the proteins to increase the protein content in food? It's we know that we had a previous webinar where we had a speaker that talk about the insect proteins and how the insect proteins are being introduced in food. That's why I was asking what is the origin of the protein you include in food to make this fortified protein foods.
Yeah, so we're using a whey type protein, and we're using a soya protein, so we have a plant-based one and animal-based one. Yeah, and then as I said, we've been using food-based strategies as well. We haven't gone down the insect route because we thought that fortification in itself is almost a barrier, whereas if we told them we were putting insects in as well, we thought that would be a step too far.
Yes, for sure. What interventions have you approached to improve nutrition in older age? Also, do you feel this is a problem related to the UK or wider spread?
Yeah, I think it's a wider spread problem, and from the network, we're trying to build our network more globally. So that's why I was giving it a plug for people to join. But I do think it's a wider issue where we've had conversations more globally. In terms of to improve nutrition in older ages, I think there is something to be done at a policy level around, you know, specific food-based guidelines for older adults, not necessarily changes to dietary recommendations, but around, you know, making those guidelines for older adults more specific to their needs in terms of the foods that they should consume. As part of the network, we've been working with the British Nutrition Foundation, who are a charity that deals in dissemination of nutritional information, and we've been developing videos for them, and we're also developing this MOOC as part of the Fortify project as well. So do look out for those, and if you see them, please share them widely so that we can get more people engaged in improving nutrition. I have to say, even my mother, who didn't believe me when I started to talk about protein at the start, or she doesn't believe anything that I tell her nutrition wise, was like, oh, 3 people have told me about protein being important since I started this project. So yeah, the messages are starting to get out.
So I have one final question before we move into our third speaker. We have learned also from our previous webinars that sustainable farming practices also lead to higher nutrient density, for example, in vegetables. So do you consider including organic products in older people's diets that have recognized higher nutrient density in micronutrients? This is not related with proteins, but it's also important.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of you have to weigh up the pros and cons, don't you, of everything. This is a cost issue around production of foods like that. One of the things we're trying to tackle at the moment is that with a lot of the people that we get in to do research studies are not struggling with poverty quite so much as other groups, and they're really the people that we need to be actually addressing it with are in disadvantaged communities and getting the messages out to them, and they possibly those foods are less affordable and less available for those communities. So I think it depends who you're dealing with, what population you're dealing with, and yes, it could potentially have a benefit, but can people necessarily afford that, or the people who need it the most afford that? That's probably the issue.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. Thank you so much for bringing this topic to our webinar. We will now give the floor to Maria Nunes Sanchez. Please, Maria, share your screen with us.
I'm going to. So good afternoon, everyone. So as kindly introduced me, I'm Maria Angeles Sanchez. I'm a postdoc in the Biomedical Research Institute of Murcia. My work is mainly focused at the moment in the mother to infant microbial transmission. And in this case, I'm going to talk about the case of bile acid. So first, we need to understand how the microbial colonization takes place during the postnatal period. So during gestation, the fetus
Maria, sorry to interrupt. You're not sharing your presentation.
No?
You're sharing your screen.
Okay.
We can see ourselves in the...
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Okay. Let's check now. Now? Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Now? Is it okay?
Yes, it's fine. Thank you.
So as I was saying, during gestation, the fetus remains in a sterile environment, and it's in the moment of birth when it enters in contact with different microbes. It could be, in the case of the vaginal delivery, it enters in contact with the microbe from the vagina or the feces from the mother, and in the case of the cesarean delivery, with the skin microbiome. So at the moment of birth, the baby has an immature gut, and it's in this moment when it enters in contact with the different microbes from the environment, where the microbial colonization starts. This microbial colonization with the time increase in diversity and the number, and it coincides with a rapid gut development at maturation. So the disruption of this microbiota composition in the infant is associated with long-term system-wide health effects such as asthma, allergic disease, metabolic disease, obesity, or defects on the gut development. So this is a schematic schematic view of how the gut the intestine develops. So in the first part, we can see the prenatal intestine that is completely immature, and there are two critical points. That is at the moment of birth, when in face the first exposure to the microbial diversity, and the second is the weaning, when the solid food is when the baby starts to take solid food. So we are going to focus only in the first part, from the birth to weaning, and this is also affected by different factors. The main one is the mode of delivery, but others like the diet of the mother during pregnancy, the type of feeding, and also host genetic will have a major impact in how this development takes place. So as I say, we are gonna focus in this postnatal period. But first, we need to know a little bit of the structure of the colon, of the gastrointestinal tract. In our case, we're gonna focus in the colon. So the colon is formed by different layers, and the one that is in direct contact with the microbes is the mucosa. This mucosa this is the basic structure of this mucosa, that is the crypt, and in the base of the crypts are the intestinal stem cells that are responsible for the production of the different phenotypes, like the absorptive, the enteroendocrine cells, or the goblet cells. So as I say, this is the part of the intestine that is in direct contact with the different microbes, but also with the different metabolites that are produced by these microbes. So I'm going to talk an overview. I'm going to give an overview about the bile acids. As we have previously said, these bile acids are actually produced in the liver, and here they are conjugated to amino acids, taurine or glycines. They are stored in the gallbladder, and they are released into the intestine after to where they where they exert the major function, that is the lipid absorption. So these bile acids are called primary bile acids, and most of them, nearly the 95%, are reabsorbed to at the end of the small intestine, and they are reused in the liver. But there are part of these bile acids that escape this reabsorption, and they enter the colon, where they have a toxic effect to bacteria. So these bacteria, most of these commensal bacteria, has the ability to cleave the bond between the amino acid and the bile acid, releasing taurine or the glycine for in one side, and in the other they release the unconjugated bile acids that can have later transformation by bacteria to produce secondary and tertiary bile acids. So these secondary, these unconjugated bile acids are known to have are known to act as signaling molecules. So that's where our hypothesis that's the base of our hypothesis, is that as most of these bacteria that has this activity against conjugated bile acids belong to the first colonizers of the gut, with the time, when the colonization starts with the time and the increase of these BSH bacteria, what are the effects, exact effect that they have in the intestine, and what are the what does this mean for the host health? So the first thing that we did was check that actually in a mother-infant cohort, that these bacteria exerting this enzymatic activity were present even at the first day, and we checked that there was an increase over the time, confirming the first results. So we then moved to a model of germ-free mice. So germ-free mice is a model where there is a lack of microbes in the animal. There are no microbes at all. They are raised in a sterile environment. So they are the best model to study this type of colonization patterns, and also as they have an immature intestine, they can resemble what happens in the postnatal period right after birth. So we select a germ-free mice model, and we monocolonize them with either Escherichia coli that it does not express this bile side hydrolase activity, or with this Escherichia coli that was with a plasmid expressing this bile side hydrolase, and compare them to a conventionally raised with a normal mice. We monocolonize at day 0 and 3, and we study all the results at day 7. So the first thing that we analyze is what effect it has, the monocolonization in the bile side, in the bile acid profile. So we did not observe difference between the germ-free monocolonized, the germ-free or the monocolonized in the tertiary bile acids, but we did observe actually in unconjugated bile acids and also with ursodeoxycholic acid. And to make sure that the changes that we were further going to study were only due to the bile acid profile and not to the short chain fatty acid profile, we also studied this short chain fatty acid, and we observed that there were no changes between any of the groups. So after that, we checked for the macroscopic differences in the different parts of the intestine. We observed that there were no difference between in the ileum or cecum between the groups, the germ-free groups, either colonized or the negative control. But we actually observed that in the part where the microbes amount was higher, we observed that there was a reduction in the colon that resembled more what happened to the conventionally raised mice. Also at the microscopic level, we observed exactly the same, that there was an increase in the grid depth, an increase in the mucus layer, and a reduction in the number of goblet cells. So we then moved to the gene expression. We selected a panel of genes in both in differentiation and proliferation, and we found that there was a reduction in 2 key transition factors that are involved in stemness. So what is happening here is that they are repressing these genes that are repressed. So are promoting the differentiation of the cells, and it was confirmed by the increase in genes actually that are markers of differentiation, like is the alkaline phosphatase and sonulin 2. To further confirm that these gene expression were actually translated in protein, and what we were observing was real, we did some immunofluorescence, and actually we observed that those mice monocolonized with the bile side hydrolase expressing Escherichia coli were more closely to the conventionally raised than to the germ-free ones. And so one thing that we observed that it was surprising is what the intestine it has a very high turnover and is continuously proliferating. But at the moment of the of weaning and at the moment of birth, there is a huge change. There are huge changes not only in gene but also in the structure of the gut. So there is actually a regression on proliferation that we confirmed by the expression of Ki-67 and an increase in apoptosis that also support our findings. So the next step that we wanted to check if these bile acids actually have an effect individually on stem cells. So we choose a model of organoids, of colon organoids isolated from mice, and we expose them to the different bile acids, either conjugated or unconjugated, And surprisingly, we found that there was no effect at all with the individual acid, the individual bile acid. However, when we expose them to a mixture more similar to what we can find in actually in vivo conditions, we found that there was a slight effect with the combination of bile acids, and we also include the LPS because the Escherichia coli that we use actually express this molecule, and it's known to be it's known to interact with the cells and as an insult to the cells. But we did not observe any difference except for the combination of the LPS with the mixture of bile acids. And when we check for the gene expression, it confirmed what we observed in vivo, that it is the mixture of the bile acids or the combination of LPS with the bile acids, the ones that has an effect repressing the stemness and promoting the differentiation of the cells. So as the conclusion here, for the first time, we observed that the effect of the bile side hydrolase activity was evaluated on the maturation of the gastrointestinal tract, that the colonization of the gastrointestinal tract with bacteria expressing bile side hydrolase leads to a faster maturation of the tract, suggesting that the unconjugated bile acids play a role in such maturation. That the analysis of gene expression suggests that exposure to bacterial bile side hydrolase suppress the activity of ACL2, a master regulator of Wnt pathway, which is coincides with a lower proliferation in the colon creates an increased expression of alkaline phosphatase, a differentiation marker for enterocytes, and that the in vitro experiments derived from isolated crease confirm that mixture of bile acid but not individual bile acids are able to suppress the expression of these markers. So what's next? So as all these microbial colonizations come mainly from the mother, so the microbiome and the metabolic profile during gestation is fundamental for this for the later health status of the baby. So we are proposing a new research line that I'm starting right now, where I'm the IB, where we are generating nutritional strategies in mothers with obesity or gestational diabetes to promote a restoration of the gut microbiome during gestation that could influence changing the epigenetic status of the baby and then promote the prevention of obesity and long-term metabolic disorders. This project is in a very early stage; it's just started. So for the moment, we don't have any result, but we are hoping that it's gonna work pretty well. So I want to thank all the people that has been involved in all this from the UCC and also from the IMIB. And if you have any question, here is my email that you can contact me at any time.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much. So this presentation is very interesting. Congratulations for your work. It is very important for us to bring more fundamental research to these webinars. And during your presentation, you showed us that it's very important to understand the mechanisms behind mother-to-infant microbial transmission and how it affects nutrient absorption and our immune and endocrine system. So given that our audience has different backgrounds, maybe I can start by asking more general questions. So my first question is about the bile salt hydrolase. Is this bile salt hydrolase expressed only by bacteria or other microorganisms, like, for example, yeasts that are also present in the gut, are also able to express this enzyme?
To the best of my knowledge, it's only expressed in bacteria, in microbes. Okay. It's an adaptive system. I think I haven't read anyone studying yeast expressing these bacteria because I think it's more toxic to them. It's as the conjugated bile acids are toxic to bacteria. This is an adaptive mechanism that they have.
So this question came from a person that studied yeasts for a long time. So that's why I asked it. I was just curious. So how does our diet affect the production of these secondary bile acids, and what can we eat to have a balanced gut microbiota that are able to produce those acids?
So it's a very interesting question, to be fair. So I think it has to be a balance between always. I can say that it's a healthy diet. Bile acids are usually more understudied in terms of microbiome. So there is more known about short-chain fatty acids and how can you modulate rather than bile acids.
Okay.
So I could not. I don't want to venture to say what you can eat, because to promote this type of bacteria. Of course, there is some bacteria groups like lactobacillus that actually express this activity that could promote a healthy microbiome, but also as there is a high variability between individuals, and also there is okay, I'm trying to just. So it has to be a balance, because these bile acids actually are produced by us, by the host. It's the bacteria, the ones that, so trying to have healthy levels of cholesterol, and also with the cholesterol metabolites, the host one, is also important. So there is no an specific food or a specific bacteria that you can take that will promote this healthy microbiome, just targeting the bile acids. I mean.
Oh, okay,
you know.
okay. I thought that there were specific bacteria that would convert the primary bile acids into secondary bile acids, and that we could actually, for instance, eat some probiotics to increase those bacteria in our gut.
Yeah, actually, there are specific. I mean, there are specific bacteria, because, for example, lactobacillus salivarius is one of them. So there are a few, mainly the bifidobacteria as well. So the problem is that, because I've talked, my presentation was very brief, but as the primary bile acids are toxic to bacteria, an excess of secondary bile acid could be harmful for the host. So it has to be a balance between the primary and the secondary.
So I think this also answers our first question, I think, because if we cannot do anything in our diet, so the question was, any practical tips on what a pregnant woman should focus her diet on? It's a difficult answer.
Yeah, I mean, for pregnant, it's a different answer, because in general, their metabolism is completely altered. It's completely different. So you think that they have to adapt to the baby, to the fetus, that it's something external to them. I don't know if that makes sense to you. So all the genes and all the metabolic pathways in general change in a pregnant woman. Actually, it's known that the lipidic metabolism in woman is completely different than a normal person. They have the cholesterol levels, triacylglycerides levels, they are very, very high. So trying to control those could actually benefit, but it's very complicated.
Okay. So our final question says, do you think changing the ability of babies to fight and build their gut won't it affect the capacity to work with and against other bacteria at an older age?
Yeah, I'm trying to. Okay, so I'm not sure about the changing the ability of babies to fight, because it's not a fight, it's more an adaptation between the microbiome and the babies in the gut. But it's the first 3 years of life, starting from the beginning of birth, where most changes take place. After the 3rd year, the microbiome of the person is more similar, it resembles more to the adult type than the babies, and is in this window of time that we can actually interact to make changes. So it's not that we are trying to fight bacteria, it's right that we are trying to promote the best scenario for the future health status. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So one final question. This question is for the 3 speakers. And just before passing the word to Claudia, that will close the session. So we are moving towards the end of our webinar session. So we have heard in this webinar session about the importance of targeted nutrition across all life ages, from fortification of micronutrients, older people, pregnancy. How can we ensure that all this information reaches the correct audiences? So should we go instead back to the bases and keep what we learned in school? Do we risk to lose our message if all this knowledge is not properly integrated? Can you comment on this? Maybe you can start with Sowrya, the first speaker.
I think the best way, do you hear me?
Yes.
The best way forward is to have more of such webinars on these topics.
Yes, it's true. I agree. Miriam, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think some of the key messages that we had in school still stand. Fruit and vegetables, should be a key component of our diet, and when very few people reach the requirements for this. But I think there's still a big education piece to be done in a lot of different areas. Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you. And finally, Miriam, Maria, sorry.
Yeah, I would like to add, I completely agree with what they say, but I also want to add that I think one of the problems, especially from basic and fundamental researchers, and I include myself, that we are so focused in what we do that we forget that we have to address to more practical, more applied science. Actually, applied science depends on in basic science, but we sometimes forget to connect these two things. And so that's why this type of initiatives like you do from Food for Sustainability are very important, because sometimes we don't know what the person in the lab next door is doing. And that's my thought, that also for that, and also to reach to the general audience, it's very difficult, especially for us basic researchers, to target them, because it's very complicated to explain what we do in a lay way that they can understand, because it doesn't seem to have a direct application, although it's important. So we have to learn. I'm not saying we, the researchers, have to learn how to address that. And so it's important to talk with each other in that sense.
Okay. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. I will now pass the word to Claudia, that will close the session. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Margarida, and thank you all for being here with us. I think we had a very interesting topic touching the world of fortified foods, and Miriam just raising our attention that older people shouldn't be neglected, because it's going to cost us more and more, and actually we're all going to go towards the older age, and we need to be very attentive to what we eat. and also Maria, pointing out that the knowledge is always advancing, and bringing out the challenge that we all have in ensuring that all this knowledge gets to the right people, and probably making sure that this information is passed at a very early age, so that we all can contribute to a more sustainable nutrition. So thank you so much, all of you, for making possible this debate. We'll surely continue next week. We will pick up in the gut microbiome topic, and we'll be exploring the world of biotics next week. So I invite you all to come and to join us. We'll be here same day, same time, same link. So hopefully we can meet again next week for another interesting discussion. It was a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.